People pay good money to see this movie. When they go out to a theater, they want cold sodas, hot popcorn, and no monsters in the projection booth.
Everyone pretend podcasting isn't boring.
Turn it off. Turn it off.
Top of the Heap, written by and starring Christopher St. John.
No, ain't gonna be no days like that. You're gonna have to shoot me right in my face, Mr. Black Pig.
When a black man bears his soul and tells his story, he lets it all hang out. His rage was the illness of the times.
Me! I just got back from a trip to the moon!
Hassled by his soul brothers with his mother dying, he can only escape to the moon.
You're gonna have to kill me, nigga! Drop that knife! Drop it! What the hell are you trying to do, huh? What, are you trying to kill me, you black bastard? I put on this uniform, and I go out there in the streets, and people look at me, and they hate me!
That's because you're a mean, selfish man.
Captain Lattimer, what has the training for the flight been like?
Isolation. Isolation is sort of like waiting at the mailbox for your welfare check.
I have a little itch here.
Yes, sir?
Take off your uniform, Lieutenant.
Yes, sir.
Hey, mother, you want me to pull out my thing and blow you a new hole? Hey! What's on your pocket? Damn, brother, you the man?
The most unusual picture of its time, starring Christopher St. John, whom you last saw in Shaft.
I can do any damn thing I want. Come on, you nigga. I'm gonna fix it so you won't be dealing for a while, baby.
Top of the Heap is a powerful, dynamic story as only a black man can tell it.
Welcome to the projection booth. I'm your host, Mike White. Joining me once again is Ms. Sam Deegan.
Hello.
Also joining us for the first time is Mr. Gary Phillips.
Hello, hello, hello.
Our Black History Month coverage continues with a look at Christopher St. John's Top of the Heap. Released in 1972, the film stars St. John as George Lattimer, a D.C. police officer who's confronted with pressures from his job, his wife, and his daughter. When his mother dies, George undergoes a bit of a breakdown where he starts fantasizing about having another life, including being an astronaut. The film managed to come out despite a feud between St. John and his producer, Joe Solomon. We will be spoiling this film, which used to be impossible to find, but now is out there if you know where to look, and hopefully a proper Blu-ray release will be out here sometime, but be prepared for spoilers is what I'm trying to say. So Sam, had you seen this one before you agreed to come on the show?
Yes. So I have a podcast called Twitch of the Death Nerve, and I think around this time last year, we really wanted to do an episode on the spook who sat by the door. And we watched a couple things that we thought would be related, like, of course, Sweet Sweetback. But that was my first time watching Top of the Heap, and I absolutely loved it.
And Gary, how about yourself? Had you seen this one before?
I had not seen it before. I had heard of it from, in particular, a buddy of mine, Michael Gonzalez, a wonderful writer and cinephile, and had, I guess, maybe a couple of years ago, then I was going to watch it because I think it's on, I want to say it's on Amazon Prime, or maybe that's right. Anyway, I wound up not watching it then, but then I was certainly happy when you asked me to come on and riff on it with y'all today. So it was a great watch, and I agree. It's really so deserving of much more attention and accolades apparently than it got when it first came out.
Yeah, I was pretty unfamiliar with this one as well. I've had, because like I said, it's not legitimately available on any medium as far as I know, but you can get it. Like, I've bought DVDs of it. I've bought a Blu-ray of it. So it's out there. I just don't know if any money is, going to Mr. St. John. I don't know who owns the rights to it. I don't know if he knows who owns the rights to it. It's one of those weird situations. And we'll hear later on in an interview with him where it was shown at the Brooklyn Academy of Music, and they thought that he was dead and did this restoration. And he's like, yeah, I'm not dead. I'm still alive and kicking. So thank goodness for that.
I'm not dead.
Yeah. He says he's not dead.
Yes, he is. I'm not.
2 weeks ago when we talked about Ganja and Hess, I really made the distinction that this is Black History Month. This is not any sort of like a blaxploitation month. This is not a blaxploitation film. This is as far away from like shoot 'em up, cops and robbers, Shaft kind of stuff as you can possibly get. I mean, there's some action scenes in here. Don't worry about it. Especially at the beginning, you get this whole riot scene and stuff. But I mean, our hero, he's not cool. I mean, he's a cool dude. He wants to be cool, but he's not having a good time of it. He's got his wife who is constantly nagging him. He's got his daughter who's messing around with this kid in the neighborhood and who's on drugs. His mother has died. He's being passed over by promotion. This is not a guy that's having a good time in his life, and he's not out there like, chasing down people that have skipped out on their bail or something like that. He's a workaday cop who makes barely enough to get by. Him and his partner are talking about taking graft, all this. It's not it's not what you have in your mind when you look at that cover of whatever DVD or whatever you're looking at, where you got him with a shotgun and all this kind of stuff. I don't even think we see that scene in the movie.
No, he's definitely, and it's right, and he's definitely, the angst-ridden, torn, and it's, and it's certainly apropos of that time period, and now in terms of the Black cop who was somewhat trapped between being part of the community, but also being in law enforcement. And what does that mean? Is he a Tom? Is he a sellout? These are things that are certainly plaguing George, throughout the movie.
Yeah, and I think it's so important that you describe it as being, the opposite of Shaft, because I think there's this really frustrating tendency, especially among genre film writers and critics, to talk about all movies in the 70s that are Black crime films or more sort of serious crime dramas to just be written off as blaxploitation. But here I feel like it does this really weird but amazing thing where it's like before the big wave of blaxploitation even really took off, it seems like it's kind of unpacking those tropes in a very kind of serious downbeat way that's so interesting.
Yeah, it's very downbeat. And I should say too, I said in the intro about him fantasizing about him being an astronaut. George goes through so many fantasies in this movie, and the fantasies are interspersed throughout this entire thing. But it's not just fantasies, it's also memories and thoughts about things. So you get to really be in his head so much of the time in this movie. And he will have a conversation with his wife, then he'll go out with his partner and he's on patrol. He's working nights, trying to get that extra money, trying to get that overtime. And he'll flash back immediately to part of the conversation he had with his wife, or he tries to arrest these two guys. I love these guys. These guys are sitting around playing cards, got this big chicken on the table.
Man, this bird is looking good, Jim. Yeah.
Drip any grease on the grass, baby.
I don't drip no grease on the grass. Shit. This blow is really out of sight.
And then they just start to berate him when he tries to arrest them. And he's just like, no, I'm not doing this. And they're calling him all these names and things.
Turn around, put your hands on the wall.
No, man. Ain't gonna be no days like that. Now, if you shoot me, you're gonna have to shoot me right in my face, Mr. Black Pig.
Nigger cop.
And they mad at you, baby. Trying to do his job like anybody else.
Pointing that goddamn gun at us. Is that your job, nigga? Huh?
Put your goddamn hands on the wall.
No, goddammit. You black-ass pig.
And then he's flashing back on that. And by the end of the movie, he has this whole litany of all these little flashes that play through his mind. And you never know when these things are coming, and they're not always signaled with that kind of wavy screen, fuzzy edge kind of thing. You get a little bit of that, but a lot of times you just like, boom, here's a little flash, boom, we're in a fantasy sequence now, and you never know when they're going to come.
Right. Exactly. And is it, and it's kind of interesting. I was thinking about even the beginning of the movie at this protest, and by the way, it's all white protesters at this rally, or I think it is. And then he gets the piss balloon in the face. But then we see George, and then the cut is that we go to George, and he's watching this on TV. And then I was kind of thinking, well, yes, it seems like it's a news report that he's watching of the incident that he was at, but then you never saw, any cameras or news trucks. So again, is this something that he's just projecting? Is he watching a blank screen on TV and he's just sort of, is he projecting something that maybe happened to him? And now he's, reliving it again, but he's reliving it through TV because he needs that kind of anchor, to kind of semi-give it reality to himself. So it's great that the film plays with his perception, of course, and then our perception.
That's a really good point. I never would have thought about that before.
This is maybe going to be a wild comparison, but the first time I saw this, it made me think a lot about the sort of Gothic literary tropes that are usually applied to female protagonists, where there's the suggestion that they're an unreliable narrator, or maybe they're going mad and they go on these flights of fancy. And so it kind of reminded me of something like Robert Altman's Images, which I think was made in the same year, where it's a very different setup, but it's this character who's clearly isolated and maybe feels persecuted or feels like they don't belong. And their brain starts to blur between memory and fantasy. And it seems like such a difficult way to write a script, but it makes for such an absorbing film experience. It's like you're always trying to figure out where we are in his head.
It really does pull you in that way, and it keeps you kind of watching and thinking, well, is this guy going to actually lose? Is George going to just lose his mind? Does he blow his top? Right? Does he go off? And slowly but surely, he seems to come apart, and then he kind of pulls himself together, right? Because he's got the job, and he's got to, as you said, he's got to make the rent. He's got to, and it kind of gives him focus, right? It does give him a purpose, but yet he's also losing his way.
My expectation watching it, especially the first time, was that at any moment he could sort of explode into violence because of exactly what you just said about how you can never tell. Like, it feels like the pressure is always building up, and like, when is it gonna explode?
The way that information is doled out in this film is very interesting. The way that we get a little bit of, I think it's like his captain saying like, oh, I heard about your mom, and later on his partner, or no, it's not even his captain at the first. It's this other guy, Pellegrino, who's a little bit aggressive, and he's just like, oh yeah, I heard about your mom, and then later on his partner brings it up, and even between that, his wife at one point is like, how many days are you going to take off? And it took me a few viewings before I realized, oh, she's talking about the funeral as well. And this whole thing, he doesn't want to go to this funeral. The funeral is down in Alabama. He does not want to go to Alabama from DC. Alabama has a lot of connotations, of course, for African-American people. It's just like, don't want to go there. And here I am in the nation's capital, which I think is also very interesting. We really get a lot of Washington Monument and Lincoln Memorial and the White House. And I think it's very important that it's set here in Washington. You're talking about Spooky Sat by the Door, which again, I think starts off in Washington through so much of that before it moves over to Chicago.
It starts off in the capital a little bit, but mostly in what's supposed to be Langley.
Yeah, and then you also had the connection too with Paula Kelly, who is in both of these films. And Paula Kelly it's George's piece on the side, though it doesn't feel like there's a real connection between these two characters. They feel very like strangers when they get together. There's some moments where you're just like, how well do these two know each other? And I think it might just be a sex thing and not a relationship thing. And I feel like he is kind of insulating himself against any sort of relationships because he's just having such a hard time with anything. I mean, on top of the whole thing with his mother dying, it's that Pellegrino character who also talks about how he got passed over for promotion. And it's that sounds very racially motivated, where it's just like, yeah, there's this other guy, this white guy who got the position and not you. Sorry, George, keep trying. And it just feels like, somebody's boot is on his neck.
And that's part of his conundrum, right? He recognizes the racism in the department. And so he tries to, to a certain extent, I suppose, try to deal with it, or at least function, understanding that that's the environment that he's in. But he also recognizes that, as you mentioned earlier on, Mike, when he goes to bust the two, I guess, petty criminals, the two cats, having some coke and chicken and wine. I think they were drinking wine. Anyway, the point being, and of course, they gave him a bunch of shit. And so then he's like this guy who's like trapped, between these two worlds. So he doesn't fit in either one. And maybe that's the point. And actually, now as we talk about it, so I guess maybe that's the point about the whole moon thing, right? So look, if I can go to the moon, I can be away from all this. But even in the moon, he's not quite away. He's not really away from all of it. but I think maybe in his fantasy and in his daydreams that he thinks, well, okay, if I could just get there in that rocket ship, I can go there to the moon. I can claim it for America and for me. All be good. And then of course, then that kind of goes haywire too. And then as we find out, it's also a false front. It's also not real.
Yeah, it's so Capricorn 1 in that scene when they like turn and there's the camera and you think that he's in outer space and then he like starts to fall over and then you hear people just like, what are you doing? What's going on? And it's like, what? Oh, now we're on a soundstage. Okay. And the flag in that scene, I mean, there are American flags throughout this entire movie. And they really get pointed out. I mean, there's an American flag on this woman's bottom. There's the American flag being torn up by the rioters at the beginning. But yeah, there's the flag that's going on. And I found it very interesting that it's an upside down flag, which means stress, on the moon. And then later on, there's one fantasy sequence where he feels very much like a black nationalist and he's got a flag behind him with like Jolly Roger on that as well. It's like, wow, we're really playing with symbols here, which I really appreciate. And then even just the artifice of stuff too, like when he is having those astronaut fantasies and it takes him all the way from like mission control. And then there's even like a scene where he had to abort a mission, but when he's on the moon and he looks up and he sees the Earth, I mean, it is so obviously just a globe. And I think that St. John is embracing that and just being like, yeah, no, this is how it is. This is this artificial world that we live in. He's not going for Stanley Kubrick effects here. He's just like, no, this is very symbolic. And I really appreciate that he's dealing with symbols so much in this film.
Maybe he's going after and fantasizing about all of these really concrete like uniforms and symbols and flags as a stand-in for personal identity. Like he doesn't really seem to know who he is. And Mike, earlier you pointed out that his relationship with his girlfriend seems really not like they don't know each other, not emotionally intimate at all. And it kind of struck me that their relationship seems like something he feels like he should be doing rather than something he's excited about. Like there's just so much emotional distance.
Yeah, it's almost like, well, of course, I've got my wife and my daughter and my, regular home type thing going on. But yeah, like it's an expectation that I've got the piece on the side that I'm, giving her money. He can't even give her $15. He's only got $12.25 in his pocket. That she's a singer at a club, I found interesting too. And like, he comes in at one point, she's doing a rehearsal. And at first I thought it was a real performance, but no, it was a rehearsal for later on. And The way I put it in my notes was like this Jerry Jones type, and I was like, wait, no, that actually is Jerry Jones.
Actually is Jerry Jones. Okay.
When he shows up, and I'm just like, oh, okay, he's in this movie too, and he just starts harassing George like crazy. I'm like, guys, this guy's a cop. Why are you giving him such shit? And they end up having a big fist fight in the club. I was like, you don't mess with a cop, man. What are you doing?
You know, it was to mention, right? Of course, I'm sure. I guess all the listeners of the projection group know this, but yes, Jerry Jones of a playwright, and of course, the writer of Dolomite, and I think the Human Tornado. I think he wrote two. Right? I think he wrote two of those. And not for nothing, by the way, Ken Norton, the boxer, is one of the patrons in the club.
Oh, wow. I didn't notice that.
Yeah. If you go back and look, that's Ken Norton. They push him aside, so he never swings his fist, because I guess he'll knock him out for real. But, so I thought that was kind of interesting. They got both Ken Norton and Jerry Jones to do those cameos, so that's pretty cool. And, of course, and now I can't see Jerry Jones without thinking of Keegan-Michael Key playing him in the Dolomite movie. So it's all collapsing in my head. By the way, as we were talking about this, it's funny. I hadn't thought about this before, but of course, Paula Kelly has the unfortunate character description. I think he's just called Black Chick in the script.
Yeah,
is that right?
That's it. Even in the end credits.
Yeah.
Come on, man. You don't even give her a name. Come on. And
so rude.
It's so rude. It's so rude. And it's so wrong. And it reminded me, she's in, I don't think it's the same year, but it's around about this time. She's in Soylent Green. And in Soylent Green, the women are called, is there some men? Anyway, for sure, though, the two women in the movie are called furniture. Right, that's how terrible it is. That's how messed up it is in the near future, where the women don't even have identity other than attached to whatever big wig, whatever sugar daddy is paying their rent. And Paula Kelly is again, I believe she doesn't have a name in that movie either. She's just furniture girl, or they just call them furniture. I mean, just oh my Lord, it's just terrible.
Paula Kelly deserved better.
Yeah, much better. Absolutely. She deserved much, much better. That's for sure.
Yeah, at least her role in Spook Who Sat by the Door is pretty meaty. I mean, she really makes her presence known in that film. And in this one, it's like, wait, is that Paula Kelly? And she does show up a few times. There's that weird moment where she starts taking pictures of him and he smacks the camera down. He's like, what are you doing? And she's like, I want to take a picture of my man. Like, in that moment almost breaks my heart when it plays. I'm just like, oh man, she really likes this guy, but he's just so off in his own, like literally off in his own world, that he can't make that connection with her.
Exactly. And of course, his fear of obviously being found out or whatever. But yeah, that all these things are always just, these pressures that he puts himself in, right? I mean, he's constantly sort of inserting himself in these positions. The squeeze is on him, financially, psychologically, throughout this whole movie. It is trippy in that regard. Yeah.
Well, he has that one scene where he's on the bus and he's wearing his cop uniform, but he wears this big trench coat over, and he does that a few times in the movie where he almost looks like a private detective or something. And this guy comes on, and the bus driver's like, oh, you didn't give me enough money, and kind of hassles him. And the guy's just like very belligerent and just like, yeah, what are you doing? Of course I gave you enough money. The guy's like, okay, I'm sorry. And he backs down. And the guy comes back to where George is sitting. And he's just like, can you believe what's going on with this guy? And he's like, hold on a minute. I'm going to give him a hard time. He goes up to the front of the bus again, and he starts talking about how he's got a gun. And George comes up and starts to shake this guy down. And the bus driver has no idea what's going on. George never identifies himself as a police officer. Eventually, the bus driver parks the bus, runs out, just like calling for the cops. The cops come over, and they grab George. And he never says that he's a cop takes his gun out and all this stuff. And then finally, he's like, well, if you'd look closer, you'd see I'm wearing the same uniform. And I'm just like, you identify yourself as a cop, especially to another cop, and especially because you're black. You don't want to end up death by cop right here in the streets of D.C. I mean, how many times has that happened?
Well, is it George's death wish?
That's true.
Yeah,
right?
That's what I think.
Yeah, he is putting himself in a lot of risky situations in this film.
It's almost Kafka-esque to watch the ways that he's shit upon by the police force but also it's like everyone he tries to interact with in the Black community hates that he's a cop. So it seems like the obvious solution is quit the force and find a job somewhere you're actually respected. And it's like, as you pointed out, Gary, like he's in a bind. He has all these financial issues, so it's not that simple, but it almost seems like he's just like perpetuating his own suffering.
Maybe that's the reality. I mean, listen, we all get stuck in, God knows I've had jobs that, weren't the greatest of jobs, but, you're at a certain point and whatever the pressure is, and maybe you got to make the rent, or you got, and in his case, he's got the kid and this and that. And so it's like, well, what else do I do? Right. So he's thinking, you're right. I mean, and he's been a cop for some time, right? He's been on the force for a while. And maybe that again is that fantasy about being the astronaut, which of course is so far removed, right, from his reality. And yet maybe that's the only thing, maybe that is the only thing he can think about or dream about, because like you said, Sam, what's he going to do? Is he going to work for the sanitation department? I guess he could work for the sanitation department. He's a civil servant, right? But maybe that's not what he wants to do. And so it's one thing is like, well, okay, I'm stuck in this job, but I, generally speaking, he can do it, he can function in it, but yet, and then you get to be a certain age or whatever, and then you get like, well, do I take that step off the pier? Do I change careers? What do I do? And it's just, and he can't, and the poor bastard can't find happiness, right? He can't find happiness at home. Can't find happiness with his girlfriend. And then he couldn't even go to a bar and have a drink. But then, of course, he gets belligerent too in the bar. So, I mean, it's just, I mean, God.
It never ends.
It never ends.
There's so many parts to the astronaut fantasy. Like when he, we initially see him, he's like walking down this hallway and he signs into this guest book, it almost looks like, and it says Top of the Heap, and there's a picture of the Earth, and he signs his name, George Lattimer, really big in there. And he goes inside of this room. And it took me a while to realize that everybody in his dream sequences are just recast versions of other characters. So it's his partner. It's this guy. What's the guy's name? Is it Ken or Tim? I think it's Tim. Is they're reading all these numbers off. His sergeant.
The older guy. Yes. That's right.
Yeah.
Right.
His sergeant or his captain is in a lot of these as well. The Tim character is interesting because it feels like that's the only person that he does seem to have connection with. He goes to visit Tim, and I'm not sure what Tim's relationship was, if he used to be on the force or something and then retired.
I think so.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that was my impression. And that Tim was kind of like a mentor figure to him, I think, right?
Yeah, that's how it seemed.
Yeah.
Who seemed to probably have a problem with alcohol as well.
Well, he's got to stay dry in the old folks' home, man. I mean, I mean, it's okay to ask for a pint now and then. I'm just saying,
There's also this thread that goes through all this. I mean, I can't remember. Was it Richard M. Dixon, the Nixon impersonator? He shows up in this, and there's one part, I think it's the first astronaut fantasy, right before they cut, you hear somebody say, "Let me make one thing perfectly clear." So as soon as you hear that, you're just like, okay, well, that's Nixon. And then later on, you see him. There's this whole thing with like a ticker tape parade, because that all takes place in this fake town, which is supposed to represent his town in Alabama. And you see Dixon up there again, doing the peace signs and all this. And in one of the other fantasy sequences, because like I said, we hop all around here, and it's okay that I'm hopping through this story, I think, we get to another one, and he's talking about how he got the job of an astronaut. He went to like a Manpower, like a Kelly Services type of thing, and saw this sign and just applied. He's like, and he keeps talking about my friend Richard.
See, I have this friend who works at the White House. His name is Richard, and he's a janitor, and I promised him, he's a very good friend of mine, I promised him that if I made it to the moon, that I would name the lunar module after him. Richard.
Oh, Captain Lattimer, how long
Hey, let it go one at a time, please. You, sir.
Yes, Captain Lattimer, how were you selected to be one of the first men to go to the moon?
Well, I was in desperate need of a job, and I was at the unemployment office, and there was a bulletin for Manpower Incorporated. I filled out the application, and after that, it was all very easy, and I always liked to fly anyway.
What are the greatest fears that come with being an astronaut?
The only one. The very prominent fear that maybe we are not wanted out there. with our human debris.
And I'm just like, the whole time, I'm like, I know he's talking about Nixon. I know that he thinks in this fantasy that him and Richard Nixon are best buds. And I love the way that the logic of this stuff works.
Certainly at that time period, that there could be this, equal opportunity employment for black astronauts. Although there had been, this is actually some years before. That's another great story about. There was he was a pilot. He was a Korean jet pilot, and black. And Kennedy really wanted to integrate the astronaut corps and really pushed to have this guy. And I'm blanking on his name now, but I've done a little research on him because I kind of used a character like that in a story of mine, and really pushed to have him be part of that. What's the term? The right stuff. He really pushed to be part of that right stuff. And of course, because of the racism and other factors, he was pushed out. And there's actually a great I'm blanking on it now, but there's a great documentary. I mean, he's not the subject of it per se, but it's sort of a documentary about African Americans and flying. And there's a great because he went on to become a sculptor. But there's a great little piece with him, and he talks about that. And so I thought maybe that St. John knew that story and was kind of pulling from some of those threads as well, because certainly in 71 it was not the case that the astronauts, well, there weren't even women, so let alone black folks. I mean, they were on Star Trek, but they weren't. But they weren't. They weren't in reality.
There were some memos that went back and forth between Fred Dutton, who was a very close aide to the president, and Adam Yarmolinsky, who was the Pentagon's equal employment guy. Dutton sends a memo to Yarmolinsky saying it would be a good thing for America if the astronaut corps was opened to members of minority groups. Yarmolinsky writes back and says, in effect, we don't discriminate, anybody can become an astronaut. Dutton writes back and says, yeah, that's not good enough. We need a minority astronaut candidate, and I'm giving you a deadline.
The Air Force responds fast. There's a young black pilot ready to start training. Captain Edward Dwight Jr., with a top aeronautics degree and 2,000 flying hours under his belt.
I did not dream that I was going to become the first black astronaut. That never entered my mind, because that was a big obstacle standing in my way. And I knew there was going to be a racial component to that obstacle, but I didn't know it was going to be as sophisticated and as determined as it was.
These tropes, these things that he's pulling on and he's giving us, it made sense that he would want the ticker tape parade in his little hometown, because of course that's also the reason, right, as we've said, he won't go back there, right? Because he's not respected, he's not looked upon as a success. But of course, if he was an astronaut, he would be lauded, right? They would have a ticker tape parade for him. They would, roll out the red carpet. But so in his fantasy, even though, of course, as we've just said, all the moon stuff was fake, it doesn't matter, because if I can sell that idea, if I can sell an image, I can be a hero in my hometown.
I was talking about the symbolism earlier. How amazing is that blown up telegram that's there in the town when he goes to visit, and he just comes in and what is it? There's like stuff on a table. Am I remembering correctly? That it's like he just shows up out of nowhere. It's almost like a Western scene. Like I'm expecting a showdown or something. And he just like is there, and there's this huge blow up of the telegram informing him of his mother's death. And he bursts through that, and it's a brick wall. And then she's way down at the other end of this long, narrow street. And he goes down to her and starts to talk to her. And that was just like, wow, you can tell he is just not happy to be here. Obviously, a lot of bad memories. And then, of course, with the death of his mother. And yeah, just afraid of disappointing her as well as all the other people in the town.
It's so creepy, though. Like, I feel like when you see those kinds of surrealistic effects in movies, they're often associated with like more whimsical fantasy, if that makes sense. But here, it's like not even a horror movie nightmare. It's just in this kind of depression zone.
But it just shows you how hip this film was, man, and how ahead of its time it was, and how hard it had to have been. I mean, let alone now, how hard it had to have been to try to figure out how can we get. There's an audience for this film, but they've got to, how do we get them to come see it, right? Because it is not a blaxploitation movie, but it would be lumped into that category, and so therefore we'll put the brother on the poster with a big shotgun because maybe that'll lure a few folks in on that. But then when they sit down to see it, then they're going to get a whole different experience now. And some may be disappointed. Now some may be revelatory, right? Some may be saying, "Oh, okay, all right, I'll roll with this." But and I'm sure that must have been part of it. When I guess you've got an interview with St. John, because I'm sure that had to be part of the knocking of heads. Like, how do we market this film?
Yeah, it seems like an impossible task.
How do you even describe this movie? If I were to give it like the elevator pitch, it's like, well, he's a cop, but he has fantasies of being an astronaut, and it's like, what, he's psychotic? It's like, no, not really.
Right. Not really. No, it's a little Fellini, it's a little Cassavetes. Yeah.
If you had the benefit of later film audiences who are more, some of whom were more used to art house films, you call it like a surreal art house drama, but in the early 70s, like how would they have marketed this?
And let's not forget, speaking of Shaft, St. John is in Shaft. St. John is the is the militant, is the guy, is the brother out of the streets that for his own reasons worked with Shaft to resolve the plot. But so yeah, and so I guess because Shaft was before this film, was that right? Am I right about that? Yeah. So I'm sure coming off of that, they thought, well, okay, we got St. John, so right back to that image, right, of him with a shot. It makes sense that you would try to play off that image, right, because then you try to think, well, all right, maybe we can get a few people, to come. A few people who watch, some of the folks who watch Shaft, maybe they'll come watch this. But you don't have the driving soundtrack, and for sure it is not the same film. It is not the same lineage.
Even if they had tried to call it a somber drama or something, that would have, I think when you mismarket a movie as being this fun action exploitation romp where you don't have to think too much and it's all just kind of different entertaining scenes, and then you walk into something that's as complicated and challenging as Top of the Heap, it just kind of curses the movie.
I mean, even then, the idea that if he could have, and I imagine St. John might have tried this, which is to say, you try to interest the Black intelligentsia, you know what I mean, about this kind of film, and if they could write about it, if they could talk about it, maybe you could build up a little, groundswell of support, and people would come and whatever. But certainly, well, in those days, even more so, it was word of mouth. It was, you had to afford. Could he afford to show them on college campuses, or could he show them, at different venues where you could try to maybe build that up? And maybe he tried it. For all I know, he tried that, and maybe that's part of the antagonism, part of that, that breakdown between him and the producer.
Well, it's funny because I mentioned how we talked about Ganja and Hess a couple weeks ago, and that was the exact same thing where the production company is, we're going to put this into this Playboy theater and have Klieg lights and this big premiere, something that doesn't fit the movie. And meanwhile, you've got producer Chiz Schultz going, no, this should be an art house film. This needs to work with word of mouth. This is like a midnight movie type of thing where you need that long tail before you start to get people to come into the theater. This is probably exactly the same thing. I mean, you're talking about the way that it's sold. I mean, the whole what was it? Rage is a symbol of the time kind of thing. And I'm looking at the lobby cards right now, and it's like one of him and Alan Garfield, where it looks like, Garfield's got his hands up like he's kind of, it almost looks like he's holding a gun on him. There's a couple shots from that bar fight. There's one of him as the astronaut, one of him as the black nationalist, and then there's a couple of him with his cop brethren. And it's like, okay, what kind of, what are you selling with this movie? This is pretty interesting. Yeah, this one should have probably been handled a little bit differently, but I mean, like I said, it sounds like he and his producer did not get along at all. And his producer was thinking that this was going to be another Shaft type movie when St. John is making this very heartfelt, very contemplative movie, which is just this whole gift box of things to unwrap constantly with all of these different things that are happening in the movie, and just seeing his performance. He gives a hell of a performance. I don't think there's one scene that he's not in this movie.
Can you imagine, though, being a director and the star, and you're fighting with the producer, and you're trying to make this kind of movie that not many people were making in the US in the early 70s? It just, like, it's such an impressive feat.
Yes, and then I guess, I don't know, did it have foreign distribution? Was it able to get to other markets? I mean, overseas markets? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure either where this played, how it played.
Right. I'm sure St. John must have, lost several, years or got more gray hairs trying to, push the film in those markets, knowing that, if you could give it a chance, yes, that people would respond. But you're right. You got to get into that art house crowd.
The end of the film is quite a shock. It's the one time where reality and the dream world collide and combine. And it's so bizarre because it's George and his partner are hanging out and they're just doing their thing. And his partner's like, I'm thinking about, switching it back to days. And so it feels like maybe this whole thing of them being these two partners out here at night, all night long and patrolling is coming to a little bit of an end. And the partners are talking about UFOs and all this. And then George is finally just like, hey, I'm going to go out. I'm going to get some air. We've got that. Suddenly he's walking, but then boom, now he's got the ticker tape parade in his old hometown. He's got Nixon cheering him on. You don't really see anybody in the streets. You just hear the sound of the crowd, which is pretty interesting. So we've got that, and cross-cutting back from that to him just walking down the street, down this dark alley. And then next thing you know, there's a gun coming out of a window up above. And of course, my mind immediately goes to JFK with something like this, where you've got the assassin up in the window, and then he gets shot in both of these versions, both in his fantasy and in his reality. And he collapses onto a pile of garbage, and that's it. That's the movie. And then you have the amazing credit sequence. And I feel like St. John is making a point here, because the credits are done in such a way I've never actually seen credits done like this before. It's the still image of him as George, as the cop version of George, with the blood on his head, on the pile of garbage in the alleyway, up on top of the screen, and then all of the subsequent credits are at the bottom of the screen. I'm just like, oh, George is at the top of the heap. Okay. And down below is everybody else. And yeah, like Paula Kelly as Black Chick. And the music just plays. It just plays us out, and it never goes away from George being at the top of the screen. It's kind of breathtaking.
The last 15 minutes or so, it almost gives me this vibe that, like, here's someone who doesn't really, and I'm sure this is not actually the case, but it makes me think of like a young filmmaker who didn't go to film school and doesn't know kind of cinema conventions and just does whatever they want. But here it feels like a more assured, confident version of that, where it's like, I don't have to do the credits the regular way. Why would I?
The film, I'm just happy that I got to see it, but also that I love it that, again, that Jerry Jones shows up, because it's such a, what is it? What's the term? Is it a meta reference? I don't know if that's quite it, but but here's, Jerry Jones, who was a serious cat and serious playwright, and but he's going to be forever known as the guy who wrote Dolomite. And he knows he's the guy, and he knows that that's what he's going to be known for. So in a certain way, he's like George too, because he's kind of like trapped in these two worlds. Like the serious work, I mean, hey, listen, I like Dolomite, so don't get me wrong. But you know what I mean? The work, the heavy work, nobody knows. Dolomite, they know. So of course he's got Jerry Jones there, of course. And of course Jerry Jones is belligerent too.
That's gotta feel terrible that you're doing this work that you care about, that's really important to you, and then this fun but maybe more superficial work that's associated with a number of stereotypes, the only thing that people want to recognize you for. No wonder Top of the Heap is so angry.
So let's go ahead. We're going to take a break, and we'll be back with a very extended interview with Mr. St. John right after these brief messages.
Hello, everyone. This is Malcolm McDowell. I just want to say that this is a request to listeners of the Projection Booth podcast to become patrons of the show via patreon.com, patreon.com/projection booth. That's pretty simple. I think you can do that. It's a great show, and Mike, he provides hours of great entertainment. So now it's time to give back, my little droogies. Settle down and take a listen and have a sip of the old Moloko. And then you'll be ready for a little of the old in out, real horror show. Bye-bye.
Welcome to the interview portion of the show. For this one, it's going to be a little bit different. I'm just going to let Mr. St. John take it. He answers all the questions I would have asked anyway. Settle in and enjoy this interview.
It's difficult when you talk about your life. There's so much to talk about that I find that I could go on for maybe 4 or 5 hours just talking about my life the day I was born to the day I'm sitting here at this age, right? And so much has gone and so much has happened. Very deep, traumatic stuff, very deep stuff that is hurtful, that made me not want to be in the world, right? That made me run and hide, and things of that sort. That deep kind of stuff, right? A family that was, we were beat up all over the place, right? Me and my family, right? And I didn't know why. I always thought that life was great. I thought it was great to be a human being, be alive, and so on. But somehow there were great difficulties in our house that I didn't know about because I was a baby of my family. So I had 7 brothers and 2 sisters. My father died when I was a little boy. Right? I was 6 years old, something like that. My father died. I didn't know what happened. I didn't understand death at that point in time. All I know is that suddenly he was there, and the next time I knew he was being rolled in the house in a casket. I didn't know what that was. And he was laying there in his casket. And I remember a little boy looking at the casket, looking at my father and wondering what happened, and touching his face. And he was ice cold and hard and down. And, I don't know what's going on. And walk around and look at my brothers. And I had brothers who had been in the army already, right? Looking at them, and they're all on the same shit, walking around, looking around like that, wondering, what happened? What's going on? Right? And I was crying. Everybody was crying. They were dancing. What's going on? That sort of stuff, right? So that set me apart from the rest of the family. And from that day forward, I realized now, in retrospect, that was the dividing line that caused everything to go haywire in my family. My mother was so brokenhearted. She didn't say from that from the whole thing. My mother was from the British West Indies, and had come to America, immigrated to America, and all she knew was that she had all these children, and suddenly the father was gone, and she was left 10 children. And what she let him do was her broken heart, right? I didn't understand it at the time, but as time went on, I began to understand that she never came back from that event, and all she could do was cook food, put it on the table, walk around like she was in a trance, and that sort of thing, right? And I didn't know what was happening with her, for a long time. Anyway, but I vowed when I was a kid that I was going to grow up and become somebody. I don't know why I thought that, but I always thought, I'm going to become somebody. I'm going to save the world. I swear to God, that was my chant. I'm going to save the world because something seems really screwed up, right? I'm going to save it, right? And that's what was in my mind all the time as I was growing up, right? And when I decided I had gone away to school to a Catholic school, I'm a Catholic. I was going to run away to a Catholic. My mother sent me away to the Catholic school because she wanted to save me from the streets. She wanted to save me from all the bad things that were going on around the neighborhoods and so on and so forth. She sent me to a Catholic school in Delaware. I always think about it because I lived, the school was not far from where Joe Biden lives, in Wilmington. The school was in Clayton, Delaware, which is not too far from where Joe Biden lived, right? And I always think about that a lot now. But anyway, and I had run away from school one time, and I got to by the sound to me back. Anyway, I arrived to school and I was crying the whole time from the drive from my home in Connecticut to this place in Delaware, right? I didn't want to go. I wanted to stay home with my mom, but she I didn't know why she sent me away. I don't know why. But as I got to the school and I drove in the gate, I looked at it, and oh my God, what a beautiful place, right? Everything changed, right? Everything changed at that moment in time. There was this wonderful, beautiful church, great fields of the children around and playing. There were 75 or 80 other little black kids from around the country there, right? And I started making fun of the kids and so on and so forth. And there were priests around and nuns around and stuff like that. And I just was going, oh my God, she's beautiful. I want to stay here. Yeah. It was great. That's what saved me. That's what actually saved me, because I became an altar boy. And I became the #1 chief altar boy. Learned all the Latin. They were doing the Mass in Latin at that time, and so was, and I learned the altar boy's Latin, and I learned the priest Latin from the Mass. I actually learned it. I would sit around and listen, and somehow it just stuck in my head, right? And I basically I could probably serve the Mass as a priest if I needed to, right? And anyway, so I was there for like 3 years. I was there for like 3 years, and a lot of things took place. I was the champ in the school. I was the best student in the school, and all that kind of stuff. I made some great friends there, etc. And then after 3 years, my mother wanted me to come home, right? And I came back home to Connecticut, and I went back to school there, and I failed everything. I went from top of the heap. I was on the top of the heap to the bottom of the barrel, let's say, and put it that way. Then we got that analogy. I failed everything in school. I couldn't go to school. I played hooky all the time because when I went to school, I was like, there was me and maybe 3 other black kids in school, in that school that I went back to. And I was treated like a dog, of course, right? And I started playing hooky from school. And more I failed everything. And like that, I went from being this smart kid to this dumb kid. I failed everything. But the one thing that happened, I played hooky from school. And I went to the movies one day, and I saw the young Sidney Poitier in a movie. I looked at him, I knew he was from West Indies someplace, right? And I looked at him and I said, I'm going to look at him. He's really black. He's a movie star. And I just fell in love with him right at that moment in time. And I thought to myself, I could do what he does. Look, I'm 12 years old, but I don't know how old he is. He must be like 20 or something, 21 maybe. I think he was like 12, 13 years older and maybe older than me. Yeah, 12, 14 years older than me. And said, I could do what he does. Look at him. That's what I want to do. I didn't even know if he was real or not, because to me at that point in my life, when I looked at movies, I thought they were fake. I thought when they had cowboy movies and they had shootouts and stuff, or any movies where people died, that they hired prisoners who were in prison to come and be in the movie. And they had to be killed in this movie. And so they accepted that they had to be killed in this movie, right? And I said, well, that's okay, I guess. I don't know, right? But they had to be killed. So So they would get killed in the movie, and I would feel sorry for them. I said, well, yeah, but these guys were in prison, and I guess they wanted to get out of prison in some way. So they volunteered to be in. They got paid a bunch of money for their families, and they were killed. And so it was all right. It was the all right thing. And then, as things went on, I thought a lot about being an actor, but I was afraid. I was afraid, because when I was a kid, I stuttered really bad. I did. I had a hard time talking, right? I stuttered really bad. And when I saw Sidney Poitier on the screen, he was perfection. I mean, he was like, wow, look at this. He's beautiful. Look at him. I want to be him, right? And then I started going to the University of Connecticut, Bridgeport in Connecticut, and then I took some, I was studying to be an actor, and I did some stuff from Shakespeare, right? And I didn't even know what I was talking about. All I knew was I memorized the dialogue, and I sort of understood it a little bit, and I did it, and everybody came rushing up to me after I did this big Shakespearean piece and said, "Yeah, man, you're a great actor." I'm all like, well, what are you talking about? You're a great actor, man. You're really good. You're really, really, really good. And so from then, I decided I'm gonna go be an actor. I can't let this go. So I was home, and I came a point in which I had to leave home. And I remember saying to my mama, I said, Mama, I'm going to New York to be an actor. And she said to me, What are you talking about? That's a business with gangsters and killers and really bad people. I said, well, I'll be careful. I'll just be careful. I want to be an actor like this guy I saw, Sidney Poitier, right? So I went to New York. I moved to New York. And the first thing that happened, in fact, I got to New York right at the time that John Kennedy was assassinated. And it's funny because that was the year I got to New York. And I remember I got this job working in a hospital. And I remember I was going to work that day, got on a bus, and the bus was totally silent. I said, this is weird. Everybody's silent. People were crying and everything like that. And I sat on the bus there, and finally I said to somebody, what's going on? What's going on? Why are people crying? And they said, the president's been assassinated, John Kennedy. And I'm going, what are you talking about? Right? And I remember driving at work, and we crying, walking around the whole place, and patients and the people at work there walking around, crying and everything like that. And that was a peak moment in my life that I realized that people get killed. Something like that could happen to the president of the United States. My God, I really better be careful in my life, because it could happen to anybody. People are crazy. So anyway, I started going to drama school at the Carnegie Hall. In Carnegie Hall, we had a school I found because I'd read a magazine that the Marlon Brando had studied there at the school in Carnegie Hall. It's called a new school, something like that, So I remember I went to Carnegie Hall, and I went up on the 8th floor, something like that, 7th floor, and I enrolled in this school, and I started studying. And these people here thought I was a really good actor, So I just said, okay, this is going to work, right? And then one day I meet this guy who was a black actor, older black actor, who was carrying some signs in front of a company in New York, picketing a company that would not hire black people, black actors to do commercials and stuff like that, right? So I bumped into him on the street. His name is Sidney, oddly enough. P.J. Sidney, right? Yeah, his name is P.J. Sidney. And he asked me, hey, come on, help me picket here. And he was picketing by himself. This huge company, Lever Brothers, or something like that. And it's a big company like that, right? And so the big, 20-story building, and we're down on the ground picketing, and people looking out the window like that at us. And we're down there with signs walking back and forth, right? And so one day, this is true. One day, I get a call from my agent in New York, and she says, this company wants you to do the commercial. I said, what company? He said, Lever Brothers. So they were trying to stop us from doing what we were doing. So I got this commercial. I did this commercial, Lever Brothers, right? I said, wow, this is great, man. This is great. But I kept working with PJ anyway, right? I did commercial. They paid me a bunch of money, Lever Brothers, and the company. And then one day, this guy, PJ Sidney, and I walking on 57th Street, and see this guy coming toward me. And he's dressed in a really fine suit clothes, and he's tall and handsome. And I said, oh my God, it's Sidney Poitier. Oh my God, it's Sidney Poitier. It's for real. And he walks up to me. He walks up to us. He says, hey, PJ, how you doing? He knows PJ. PJ knows him. And he said, my friend is Ben Christopher. And so he says, okay. He says, we're talking for a while. I'm looking at Sidney Poitier in the flesh. I'm standing there looking at him. He's tall. He's beautiful. He's dressed fantastic. He was a star already by then, big star by then, right? And then he says to me, hey, listen, I want you to be in my next film, my film I'm doing now, called For Love of Ivy. I want you to be in this film. And I said, okay, and it was about this guy who let a gambling, in a big truck. And he drove around the city, parked different places, and people would come and he'd be all dressed up in tuxedos and so on, so on, and gamble, right, inside this truck. And so I was going to be one of the dealers and stuff like that, right? And this was great. I did have a part just like that, right? And he bought me this tuxedo that I still have all these years later. I still have the tuxedo. And it still fits to me just like it fit me the first day he bought it for me, right? Sidney Poitier. And through the course of life, I would see him from time to time. After I made Top of the Heap, he would see me. He would say, he'd come over to me and say, listen, we need you. And I was heartbroken at that point in time because I didn't understand how to deal so much with the racism that was going on all the time, right? I had to work really hard to get anything together. I did know that you can't be a big head or a hard head with the people in Hollywood. You couldn't act that way because they'd kick you to the curb in a minute. You'd be done, right? So okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to play that game because I want to get ahead. I got nothing to go back to. I couldn't go back home. My family was gone. Everybody was gone. Everybody broken up, and I didn't know what to do with my life, right? And so I said, I have to make it in some way in this business. I told my mother I would. I said, don't worry, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. I'll come back and get you, take you away from this place, right? And I think of it now, it's just a heartbreaking thing for me. But so I knew that I had to behave in a certain kind of way to be able to get through all this stuff. And people go, you can't do nothing. There's a black guy with a big nose and everything, and they don't like black people. You'll never get anything, so on and so forth. And then we just try to push them off. Pretend I was all right about that, all that stuff. But I know I had to behave in a certain kind of way to be able to get over and get everything like I wanted it, right? So little by little, I did that. And then I got this job with wonderful company in New York. And it was something called Bianchini Ferrier, Italian company that imported precious fabric, silk and other precious fabric that they would sell to the states in New York, right? To all the designers in New York, right? And a lot of big designers would buy stuff from them. So I had this great job, but I didn't tell them that I was also an actor. They wanted me to work for the company. After a while, they wanted me to work for the company, right? And one day I went to the president of the company. I had been working there for a few years, right? And during that period of time, I had started a theater of my own in Lower Manhattan, on near 42nd Street. I started a theater, an off Broadway theater. Yeah, off Broadway. There was Broadway, off Broadway, and there was off Broadway. Broadway. Right. In this theater, I had like 50 seats in it, and I started directing. I bought myself a director's chair. Put an ad in the newspaper. I started auditioning actors to be a part of my company. I didn't know what I was doing, but I knew what I was doing. I just had a feel for it. I just understood what I was doing, right? So I sit in my director's chair and I audition actors, and I could tell a good actor from a bad actor, and a good personality from a bad personality. Because I wanted people to work, because I knew we were going to work over a long period of time. I wanted people that were going to fit together, right? So I did that. I sat in my director's chair. People would come down and audition. I auditioned Alan Garfield, my son, Alan Garfield, and who ended up working at the theater for a long time. Did some stuff there. He did a lot of writing there, and then one day Alan Garfield came and said, "Hey, could you appoint me a writer in residence?" So I said, "Sure." He got it. "You're a writer in residence right here at the Troop Theater." It's called the Troop Theater of New York City, right? And so I kept that place for like 7 years. And that's 7 years. I had someone called me, some woman called me and said, can you help me do an audition for the Actors Studio? But at that point in time, I was interested in the Actors Studio because I knew that it was supposed to be the big shot in town, right? But I didn't audition because I was busy with my own theater. So I said, "Yeah, okay, I'll give you a hand." So what do you got? She showed me the scene. I said, "It's a terrible scene." "I'll write you a scene." I wrote her a scene, and that I was going to do with her. And so I remember going that night for the audition. It was Al Pacino was there auditioning. Bobby De Niro was there auditioning. Alan Garfield was there auditioning, right? And a whole bunch of guys like that, right? And at that point in time. And I remember standing on the step waiting for my turn to go audition. And I finally go up there to audition, and she was terrible. But I auditioned. Within a few days, I got a note from Lee Strasberg saying they wanted me to come back and audition again. Not that girl. They didn't like her. Shelley Winters, to come back and audition. So I go back and I go back by myself, and I do play. I forgot the name of it, but I did this play, and I did a scene, and the next day they saw that you're going to be a member of the Actors Studio. They accepted me just like that. I didn't know that people had auditioned for the Actors Studio for years trying to get in, right? But I got in one audition, and then I got in it. I didn't understand that. So I remember Lee Strasberg calling me and inviting me to his house. I'm at Lee Strasberg's house. I'm overlooking Central Park, right? I go up there, and all these people are there, Paul Newman, and people like that. Big stars were there. I'm going, oh my God, what am I doing here? How did I get here, right? But I knew that something happened in my life. I knew that somehow I was going to do all right somehow, right? And then Shelley Winters, she wanted to take care of me and make sure I was all right. So I remember her coming to me and saying, because she lived around the corner from me in Manhattan, right? Her big place. I live in Little Hubble, and I'm corner. So she said, "You come to my house whenever you are hungry or need anything, knock on the door, and tell my maid, let you in, and fix you something to eat," right? I didn't understand how deep that was. What that really meant. And I would do that. We'd go knock on the door, and then the maid would answer, and then say, "Oh, hi, let me in." And she would just stand and cook for me, everything like that. And then Shelley became a big fan of mine. Anyway, so then I knew somehow it was going to be somewhere. And little by little, when I got the Actors Studio, I started studying all those people, great stars, the Actors Studio. I said, somehow it's going to rub off on me, and I'll be all right. That's essentially kind of what happened, and all I knew was that I had to behave in a certain kind of way that I knew I didn't want to piss people off. I didn't want people to people who were audition. You can't go in and act like an asshole. You can't do that. You have to go in and act like, okay, I'm here for this and that kind of stuff like that, right? And be nice and so on and so forth. Because if they don't like you, they'll kick you to the curb and they don't want you back in anymore. They're canceling people, right? And so I knew that, I learned that through the period of time having my theater and dealing with a bunch of actors that I was dealing with for a number of years, and I was able to sell my theater and that cycle, and I had a little bit of money from that, and that helped me when I became a member of the Actors Studio. That helped me to do what I wanted. The first thing I did the Actors Studio was for payback for making me a member of the Actors Studio. I went out and bought a bunch of paint. And I painted the Actors Studio in New York. I painted the building outside. I got on a ladder, painted the building, I painted windows, I did everything really not nice because I needed a paint job, right? And then everybody liked that very much. I was painting my hand up, and the guys from this great director from Greece, I got acceptance there. When I got acceptance, I knew that was the key. You had to create an acceptance for yourself before you can get anything done, especially in an era of time that I was living in, right? I knew I was living in an era of time when the guys, the black people before me, had gotten their butts kicked all over the place, right? And they couldn't get anything done. They did things themselves. People who did some great movies, and I even weep about it now. The guys who did some great movies who couldn't get real recognition, they got their butts kicked, right? But they did some great movies. Because when you're an artist, you're compelled to work. You just want to do things, right? And so I had put together now a thing where all those people who were the black actors and actresses who were people who were working just before me, right? I wanted to do what I could to give them the recognition that they deserved, right? Even if they had died. Right? I wanted to do that because not for them, I wouldn't be here. Because even though I had it hard, they had it 10 times harder. Even though I went through a lot of racism, they went through racism 10 times worse than I did. Right? And the black theater in Harlem, the black theater in New York, I worked there a few times and everything like that, and still. It's more to being black than needs to, and the thing I did off Broadway, I did it on Broadway with Chuck Gordon, and Chuck Gordon wrote No Place to Be Somebody, and he won a Pulitzer Prize, Chuck, and Chuck was a great guy. He was a kind of crazy guy, but he was great. And then I remember I was working at I was doing a scene at the Actors Studio, and I did this scene with, Lee Strasberg's wife. And I just have to remember the love scene with Lee Strasberg's wife. And Lee Strasberg is sitting there watching this scene, and all these people, all the studio people sitting there watching this scene. And somebody said to me before I did the scene, what's Lee Strasberg's wife, man? I'm an actor, but just acting, But I'm doing this passionate love scene with Lee Strasberg's wife. He didn't say anything, but his wife and I got along really well, right? But he had a young wife, right? Lee Strasberg. So I think that's the reason why he really liked me, because I was able to do that and not be afraid that doing the scene because it was his wife. They were just actors working, right? Scan Ilya Kazan, I met at the Actors Studio when I was painting the building, and he would come out and say, "Hey, what are you doing?" I said, "I was painting the building." He said, "It looks nice, it's real nice, right?" And sometimes we would sit together on the steps of Actors Studio. I didn't know who Ilya Kazan was. I'm just a black kid, didn't know anything about anything, right? He said, I didn't know that he had a hard time coming to America and all that kind of stuff. He did that movie about how he made it to America and so on and so forth and everything. And later on in life, as I began to understand who these people were, I said, damn, that's Ilya Kazan, man. Great. He was just a really nice person. We talked a lot and everything like that. And I said, I can't believe I would just sit there and talk with the great Ilya Kazan, the great the director, right? And some of his stuff rolled off on me somehow, right? Help me just to touch shoulders with these people, right? So anyway, and then I was, as time progressed, I left my theater behind. I sold it. I went to the Actors Studio. I was studying there. And then one day I got this, I don't know, I did a play with Paul Sorvino. auditioning actors that I want to direct this play at the acting studio. And this was going to be my big thing that I was going to present to Lee Strasberg, this work I could do. So I did Antigone, directing Antigone, but I turned it into a modern version of Antigone. The guy she fell in love with was a tennis player, and he was a black guy, right? He was a black kid, right? And they were falling in love, and then finally I auditioned a bunch of people, and I hired Al Sorvino to play the King Creon, right? And this ties in to my movie Top of the Heap, the King Creon. And Paul Sorvino told me, he said that when he came to audition, I liked his girth and everything like that, and size, etc. And I thought he was a pretty good actor at the time. So I hired him to do the part at the actor studio. And he had been trying to get in the actor studio for a number of years and failed and had quit and went back selling cars in New Jersey or something like that, right? And so I had him for an audition. I gave him the part of King Creon. And then they liked him at the actor studio. And he was able, through that, to get into the actor studio. So, he tried to be a wonderful actor, did some wonderful things. When I did Shaft, I don't know. So Shaft was a whole thing that happened in life, right? That happened to me. And when I did that, I was like, well, okay, I don't like doing this stuff. I don't like doing that. I don't want to go and shoot with a machine gun and shoot people and think that that's a great thing to do. It's not for me, it isn't. I don't want to do that, right? And I don't know if I told you about that, what happened with Shaft and how I got that part, right? And my agent sent me for this part. I just want to tell you, my agent sent me for this part of Shaft. And I go there on Fifth Avenue in New York, and I go up there and I go into this room, and all these people in there, director, Gordon Parks, and all the other people are there, producers, et cetera, a room full of people. And I go in to read, and I go and they give me the script, and I have the script in my hand, and I think I'm going to read for the part of Shaft, because that's what my agents sent me for. And he said, you go read for this part on Fifth Avenue, this place, and read the part of Shaft. I said, oh, this is great, because I want to get a lead in the movie, because I want to be a big movie star, because I have important work to do in the world, right? If I can be a big movie star, I can do that, right? So I drove there to read for this part in this office, and I had the script in my hand, and I said, okay, what do you want me to read? What part do you want me to read? And they said, well, actually, we want you to read for the second part, Shaft's buddy. I said, no, I was sent here to read for the part of Shaft, the lead in the movie. And then somebody said, well, we've already got somebody for that. We already have an actor to do that. I said, oh, really? I said, well, but my agent sent me to read here for the part of Shaft. Maybe I can knock him out, right? So he said, no, we got this other guy. We want you to read for the other part. And so this is what happened. I had the script in my hand. I closed it, put it on the desk, and I said, I don't want to read for this part. That's stupid. You're insulting me. I don't want to read for the second part. I want to read for the lead that my agent sent me here to read. But we got this other guy. And I said, okay, thank you very much. And I just walked out of the office. I walked out of the office. I got out of Fifth Avenue, and I went, oh, what'd you do? What the hell did you do? Oh, what'd you do? And you turned, I didn't know that every black actor in New York wanted that part. So I go home that night. This is true. I go home that night. I'm sitting there in my apartment, and I'm thinking about it. And what did you do? You can't do that, man. You have to take what you can get. So on and so forth. And then the phone rings, and it's Gordon Parks. He called me on the phone. He says, Christopher, I want you to do that part. The second part, Ben Buford, second part in the movie. At that moment, I thought to myself, oh, this is great. This is great because they're going to give me the part. It's just like that, without even reading. He said, don't worry about reading. I want you to do that part. So we're going to send you the papers. If you want to do it, send you the papers, sign you up and everything like that. And I said, yeah, that'd be fine. That'd be fine. I hung up the phone. I went, yeah, this is great. I thought I did myself in completely, but I didn't. I said that was a great audition I had. Once in a while, and when actors do something like that, it works out for them, right? It works out for them. They get ornery and say, no, I don't want to do this part. Get out of here. And throw the script away and walk out of the office. And then someone will come running down the hall and say, hey, come on, Megan. We want you to do the part. Come on, we want you to do it. Right? Like that. And they beg you that. And that's what happened. Gordon Parks called me at night, and I swear to you, because I was in bad spirits when that happened. I said, hey, why did you do that? Why did you behave like that? Right? And it's because my spirit want to be the lead actor. I'm more important than some cheap second fiddle kind of guy. I'm more important than that. That's what I thought, right? So anyway, that's how I got the part in Shaft. And I remember thinking, after Gordon Parks hung up, I said, yeah, okay, send me the paperwork and everything. I hung up. I remember, oh, God, this is great. I got a part in Shaft. It's like that. I didn't even have to read. This is a wonderful thing, and that kind of stuff like that. Right? And anyway, that's how that happened. But then the movie Shaft taught me a lesson. Taught me a lesson that I had to learn. And that's what was good about it. That's the good part about it. Taught me a lesson I had to learn. That's why they never called me back to work in another Shaft movie. They did three movies of Shaft, right? They never called me back, and because when the first movie came out, critics said Christopher St. John should have played Shaft. And the reason why is because they thought that Richard Roundtree was not authentic. They thought I had a more kind of persona that would make Shaft, more powerful and strong. And he doesn't BS. He doesn't BS like that. He doesn't go around like, and I call it that. People said that Richard Roundtree was like a toy. Like a toy, it wasn't really real to them, and so forth, and like that. So, and that's why I was never called back to being in another Shaft movie. So, one night I'm sitting at home thinking, I'm going to do a movie. How can I do a movie, right? And I'm sitting there. It's about 3:00 in the morning. I'm looking at television, and I see this space picture on television. This guy, astronaut, he's lost on some planet, right? And he had an old raggedy spacesuit on and everything like that. And he's a white dude, and he didn't know if he was just rolling around on the planet. He didn't know what to do about anything, And I'm looking at it and saying, well, I wonder what he's doing, And then I said, terrible. It's a terrible movie, right? That's when Top of the Heap came up. I looked at it and I said, that was a black guy on some planet. Just being a black guy, it would be a little more interesting than this guy. Because this guy, he was doing nothing. Who cared, right? So that's when I started to write Top of the Heap. And I think that I wrote Top of the Heap in Shake Time. I called it Top of the Heap because of Frank Sinatra. I like that song that he sang, where he said, New York, to the top of the heap, like that. I like that title. He's at the top of the heap, and I already think of it like top of the heap, bottom of the barrel. Top of the heap, bottom of the barrel. I thought of it like that. That is worked well together like that. So that when I started writing that movie, I chose the title Top of the Heap because of what it meant to me. To be at the top of the heap meant you could be at the top of the heap, but you could also be at the bottom of the barrel. The opposite of that was the bottom of the barrel, right? So I said, well, that's who I am. I could be at the top of the heap, but I know that in reality, right now in life, I'm really at the bottom of the barrel because I'm a black guy walking around in this society and they want to kick my butt all the time, but I'm not going to let them because I'm going to make them care about me in some way. I'm going to like me in some way because that's the only way I know I can get through, right? I don't want to be sent back home. So I started writing Top of the Heap, and I realized I made Top of the Heap 12 years before they ever had a black astronaut. 12 years before, right? And for some reason, I had this fascination with space. I don't know what it was, but I had this fascination with space. I think it was because I thought to myself, I would think about myself, that I'm going to go to the top, Mama. I'm going to go to the top. I'm not going to stop me, They're not going to stop me, see? So I thought about it. I didn't know what, I'm going to go to the top. But I also knew that I was at the bottom also because I'm black, so that's what they say, right? So on the top of the heap, and I wrote it in about, I don't know, 6 weeks, something like that, or quicker. And then I started to go around to try to sell it. I found a producer. I sent it to a producer who said to me, I went to see him, and he said to me, yeah, I kind of like your script, but I think you should change the astronaut to a baseball player because that's something that you can be. I said, no, I can be an astronaut if I want. What the hell's wrong with you? Why would you say it to me, right? And I was grabbed up by the collar, the shake of me, saying, what the hell what are you talking about? It's a big production into the human stuff. So then I walked away, and I found this, and then I put an ad in the paper, and this guy called me. His name was Joe Solomon, a guy that did a lot of movies, a lot of low-budget movies, a crook, just a big crook. But he did movies. He did the Evel Knievel movie, right? He did a lot of movies about gangsters and stuff like that, right? But for some reason, I guess he wanted a black movie because he read my script and he called me in. So we go in there, and I go in there, and I walk in his office, and I have the script here, and I say, okay, turn your phone off. Don't answer the phone while I'm here talking to you, because you'll just be distracted, right? So he goes, you take your phone off, and I went through the entire script. I asked every part. I did every part in the script. I did my part. I did this part, my partner's part. I did the woman's part. I did the little kid's part. I did everything, the whole thing. And then after I finished, I was in his office on the 9200 building, California. He pulled out his checkbook, starts running a check. He writes me a check for $25,000, right? Just like that, right? And he said, yeah, let's do this movie, right? And I go, yeah, let's do this movie, right? It just happened. I swear to God, that's the way it happened. It happened just like that, right? I remember going home, and I had no money at that time. I was broke by that. I was in a little apartment in Venice Beach, on Venice Beach. And I drove in, wow, man, I'm going to do this movie, And then, and I told him at the time, I said, no, I'm going to write this movie. I'm going to act in it. I'm going to direct it. And I'm going to be the producer. He said, okay. And that's how I got that arranged like that, right? Because, so I'm saying to myself, I knew how to do all that stuff because I knew how to disconnect myself from being the actor to being the producer, from being the writer. I knew how to compartmentalize everything so that I could be able to do all those parts. It just came the natural thing. I don't know why, but it just did. It just did. I guess I don't know why. It just happened that way. I could think like that, right? If I was doing something as a producer, I knew enough to include other people into what I was doing with the assurance that I wanted their help. I want your help. That's what we're doing here. We're working together. And I think I learned how to do that because I knew you have to work with people. You have to work with each other in order to do something good, right? When you don't work together and you try to do something, there's always backstabbing and people trying to do you in and stuff like that. And that's what happened a lot in Hollywood. That's why they do so many movies that turn out to be rag-ass movies because they don't work together. Because this guy hates that guy and this woman hates that woman, and everybody hates each other, and you cannot function in a good way to do something good that means something in the world if you don't work together. That's all it comes down to. In the end, it's all it comes down to. And I knew that. I really knew that. So therefore, that's how I got, when I finally got Top of the Heap up and running. The only thing that happened, one day I was in my trailer on location where we were shooting. I think I was shooting the scene where I was getting ready I'd gone back home to visit my my hometown after I became famous as an astronaut, right? In terms of movie language, right? And I'd gone back home. I got a telegram in the movie. I got a telegram from somebody my hometown who said, we would like you to come home. And because since you went to the moon, so I thought, that's when I said, so this is great, right? So they invited me home. I arrived there, and nobody was there. Nobody at my hometown to welcome me, right? And so, and to me, I was doing something again to change the world. That's what I had in my mind all the time. What I have in my mind now, today, I still think that's my job on the planet, to find a way to change the world. And now I know at this point in time, when you talk about changing the world, you do what you can to change that person, and that person, in that school, and little by little, you will touch a lot of people who also will have the same idea in their mind. Do something good to change the world. Don't live in a world that's so screwed up that you become just a screwed up person. When I look at the world now, it is screwed up. It's completely screwed up. We know it. Everybody knows it, right? The politicians are crazy people, and they do terrible things to each other, right? And there's a small group of people who still want to think that we can change all this and make it something great as it should be, right? The world. And so when I remember that the guy, the producer, I started doing the film, and we even had some real friendly moments. And we went to a trip together and driving from in California, driving to San Francisco, where he had to go up there for some business. He said, "Yeah, come on, ride along with me. We'll have lunch and this, that." And it was a great day, right? But then I'm doing this movie, and I'm doing the scene where I arrive at this my hometown, right? And by then he's begun to realize, well, this is not the kind of movie I thought it was. This is not just because his whole idea was this. He said to me, I just want 90 minutes of niggas running around on the screen. That's all I want. That's how he actually said that to me, right? I remember listening to him say that, and I thought to myself, well, he's just ignorant, that's all. He's just ignorant. You know, you can't have 90 minutes niggas running around on the screen and think that they do something great. You know, because I'm thinking to myself, hey, you don't understand it, but I want to do something great. And so I just proceeded on my way to do what I was doing, right? And knowing that nothing let him get in my way as I got this opportunity, right? Since I'm an idiot like that. So he comes to the set one day, and I'm getting ready to shoot the scene where I find my mother. I go back to my hometown in Alabama. And Alabama, by the way, had represented in my life during the course of my whole life this place that was a terrible place for Black people. And that's all it ever represented to me, right? And I other stories I've written had to do with Alabama and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, so I'm going back home, I'm sitting in my trailer and trying to get myself ready to go on the set and do this scene. It's going to be a difficult scene because I had to weep and cry and all that kind of stuff like that. And this guy shows up, this Joe Solomon guy shows up, and he knocks on my trailer door. And I come to the door, he said, "Hey kid, what the hell's going on here? What kind of movie is this?" Right? I said, I knew right. I knew right away I had a problem. But he said, "What kind of movie is this? I told you what kind of movie I want, you know." And so I said, look, I'm busy right now. Leave me alone. I'm trying to prepare for shoot the scene. And he kept going. And I got some guys that said, "Please take him and drag him off the set. Get him out of here. Get him out of here, please." They're dragging him away. And he's yelling at me. He said, I don't want to try to move. I don't want this movie. What the hell is this movie about? And all. I'm thinking to myself, wrote me a check and move it for you. You had it in your hand. You saw it. And I don't know. What are you doing? That kind of stuff, right? So I got these guys. They were happy to drag him off the set. They dragged him off the set, and they put him in the car and said, "You get the hell out of here. Get the hell out of here." Right? And I remember going back to sitting in my dressing room going, "Oh, God." And I almost started crying right then, right? because this has happened. And then I went out to do the scene, and I realized that it was a perfect study for me to be able to do the scene, because I go out my trailer, and I'm in the middle of the street, and then I'm saying, "Where's everybody? My hometown. Where is everybody? Where are you? There's nobody here. What the hell?" I'm using language, really. I'm really going at it. I'm really saying, "Dirty motherfuckers, you son of a bitch!" You know, like that. I'm really going at it. And then I see the studio, and it's playing America the Beautiful on this little record player that left in the middle of the street, puts it on display, America the Beautiful, and nobody's there, and they have flags up all over the place and everything. And then I see somebody way down the street, way down the street, and I start running down the street, and I get closer, and it's my mother sitting in a rocking chair. I had gone there for her funeral, in the movie. In my mind, I had gone for a funeral, and this woman is sitting in a chair, and she's my mother. And I go there, and I ran up to her, and she's sitting in the chair, and by then I was completely broken. I remember kneeling down, and she knew what had happened, and she started whispering to me. And you can't hear this in the movie, but she started whispering to me. She said to me, "Don't let them get to you. Don't let them destroy you. You're a great man." And she's saying things like that to me. We're whispering, which is not the dialogue in the movie, but she was saying it to me as a mother to her son, you know. And I said, "Mama, I walked on the moon. That's where that came in. Right? That's how that happened." And I just started crying like a little baby. And I knew, like I was talking to my own mother, right? Who had died some years before. I told my own mother I walked on the moon, right? Which represented to me that I got to the highest pinnacle that I promised I would get to, you know. And I don't know what's going to happen from here, but I walked on the moon, right? And then I managed to be able to do that scene that way with that woman helping me, you know. And she was just an actor I hired, right, to play that part. And then and I get up and I start dancing with her, just dancing in the middle of the street. And then I spin around and I turn around. There was a very young African woman in African clothing standing in the street, and I'm dancing with her now, right? And going back in time. So, and that's how I managed to get to that scene. And I remember thinking to myself, "Joe Solomon, I'm glad you came today. I'm glad you came here today, because you are able to inspire me to do what I had to do, to realize that people like him, like Joe Solomon, that I was fighting against all my life." So I managed to get through that, and I did that movie, and I managed to finish the movie. And there's probably some other things that I should tell you about that. But anyway, Top of the Heap was really born, right? And when it came out, I remember I had two children in the movie. I had a young girl who was I think she was about 14 to 15, and I had a little boy who was I think he was about 7 or 8 years old, right? And Joe Solomon, the only thing I didn't get was the right to edit the movie exactly as I wanted to edit it. And he wanted to hurt me. He got pissed off at me about what happened. He wanted to hurt me. And so he did things in the movie that he hoped would hurt me, right? And but the truth is that I remember thinking to myself, don't shoot too much, because then they got too much to take out, and when you made mistakes and so on and so forth. So and that kind of worked for me. But then on there with editing, I remember going there and watching the editor and saying to him, I don't think you should do a cut that way. I said, where's my son? Where's my son in there, you know, and everything? Where's this scene? Why are you cutting this scene so short? It's stupid. You're making the movie stupid, right? And he said, the boss told me to do this. So someday he told me to do this. I said, and the hell with the boss. I'm the boss. It's my life, right? And kind of like that. See, so, but they got me. they got me. See, so when it was done and it was released, I was like, point in time, I was so hurt by it, by what they did. I was going to steal it. I know. One day I went to the studio at 20th Century Fox. I was going to steal everything from the editing room. And I remember going there, and I should drive my car around there. I was going to steal everything, put it in my car, just take it away. And I thought, yeah, no, if I do that, they'll call the cops. The cops will come and arrest me. There'll be a big stake in Hollywood that the crazy filmmaker did this and did that and everything like that, so I can't do that. I remember walking with my head down saying, well, they did me in. But then when it was released, I was surprised that it got some really good reviews, really, really good reviews, a few very hateful reviews, and I learned how people who are critics, who hate you because they hate you, and in my case, they hated me as a black man here, saying the things I was saying and doing the things I was doing, and certain bad reviews came from people like that, and I recognized that. I kind of certain few really fantastic reviews, right? I'm going like, I'm surprised, right? But then I get bad, and you know what happens when you read the bad reviews? They seem to hurt you a lot more than the other things, right? People say bad things about you, that they can calling you a name, calling you a bad name, right? You know, and then so people who wrote bad reviews, there was only a few of them, but they affected me very deeply, right? But then I remember during the time that I don't know how it got to the Berlin Film Festival. Somebody must have, I don't know how. I think somebody came to me and said something to me, and I said, yeah, sure, right? And I walked away, right? Sure, great, yeah, we'll do it. With it. And they had a copy movie, went to the Berlin Film Festival. I didn't even understand the significance of that. I was so brokenhearted that I thought they ruined my movie. I was so brokenhearted that I didn't pay attention to it. But years later, when I realized that the story was that they showed the film several different times because people wanted to see it at the Berlin Film Festival. It was up against major international filmmakers, right? And see, the guy that won that year, 1972, I can't remember his name right now, but if you look at it, you'll find that he was a big-time filmmaker. So there I was, top of the heap, had the whole thing had been boiled down to about 10 films to win the Golden Bear, right? And Top of the Heap was one of those. I mean, I don't know how did that happen, right? When I realized the significance of it, right? And I came in really close, but I thought that because I was up against major worldwide filmmakers from around the world, that, man, it's great. I don't know how I did this, but that's great. That's a blessing in disguise, right? And also, I had the guy from the Cannes Film Festival had come to see the film, and he wanted to go to the Cannes Film Festival, and I made the mistake of mentioning it to Joe Solomon, and he said, hell no, you're not there to the damn film. They'll think it's some highfalutin stuff, and the niggas won't go and see it. That's what he said. I swear to you, that's what he said. Looked at him like, are you crazy? What are you, crazy? You know, and that's why it didn't get to the Cannes Film Festival, because he put a kibosh on it, right? But somehow I managed to get it to the Berlin Film Festival, and I came close to winning. My God, this is great, right? But just going there and realizing the context of the story about what happened there, I was like, wow, that's pretty great for me, you know? So then the movie is out there. But somehow when they started this black film boom, right? And all those films that they were making, what do they call now? The films that were all the black films were being made, and Top of the Heap became part of that. which I knew wasn't part of that. Somebody had said it was a movie that Top of the Heap was a movie that was supposed to go here, but somehow it was sent here, right? And it was in the wrong place. It was just in the wrong place, and that's how it became one of those black film movies that they did. They did about, I don't know, they did about 400, 700 movies. I don't know how many movies they did during that period of time, because Hollywood was hurting, the studios were hurting, and they thought they could make some money to be able to get through this cycle of change. And then when they were ready to stop it, they would stop it, because they didn't want black people to get too much recognition that they could go on their own, so to speak, right? And that's kind of what it was, right? So my film was in there, and there's nothing I could do about it. And it was just, I knew it shouldn't be there, but it was there. So people would call me and say, this movie doesn't belong there. So other filmmakers, there was one filmmaker who, at the very beginning, and I was broken hearted about the whole thing that happened, he would call me all the time. And I know him, I can't remember his name right now, but he would call me all the time and say, he'd say, listen, you got a special movie. You got a special movie. You have to recognize that, right? And he was a filmmaker himself, right? You have to recognize. Let me take out his name right here. Well, wait a minute. There was this guy, Nicholas Rapole, who's a film historian. He's the one that made this really happen big time, because somehow he saw the movie somewhere. Years later, he saw it, and he said, this is a very different movie. This is not a black exploitation movie. This is something special. And so he started looking at it, and he started calling me, right? I wouldn't pay attention to him at first, but then somebody said, this guy he's a film historian. You got to listen to him. So we started communicating, and he started calling me. And for a year, he would call, and we would talk about Top of the Heap, about my life, about everything, about Top of the Heap, right? And I would tell him how I got it done, what it did to me emotionally, what it did to me, what it did to my family. The movie was really about my brother. My brother was a shop in Connecticut. And he tried to arrest a friend of ours. Classic story. My brother grows up becomes a cop. The so his black side grows up and becomes a drug addict and selling drugs, right? And then my brother has to arrest him one day. So he knows him. So he goes to him and says, I gotta arrest you. So they have a fight. The guy grabs my brother's gun and shoots him with it. He didn't kill him, but he shot my brother with the gun, right? And so from that point on, my brother's life took a dip in a whole different direction, because he got shot with that gun, and then he had to stay off work for a long time because he got shot. And then sometime after that, my brother tried to get back on duty, and finally he got back on duty, and then he did a fire in a house or something like that, and he went in this burning fire to rescue some kids or something like that, and he had experienced really bad smoke inhalation, really bad, right? And from there, his life went on like that, and then my brother ended up dying from that, right? And the police department, from when he got shot, and from when he goes into the house as a cop, while he's on duty, and he never got back to what he was before, and he ended up dying from smoke inhalation, which ruined his lungs, and he couldn't breathe on oxygen and stuff like that for the rest of his life, and died, right? And that was that, right? And of course, the police department in Connecticut did him in completely. He didn't get what he should have done for getting shot. Especially the black guy. The black guy gets shot. They always get shot. That's what they do. And then he's a black guy going to a house to rescue some kids. I think the kids happen to be white kids, right? He rescued them, but he had the smoke inhalation, and that took him off duty. He couldn't go back to work for a long time. again, and then he got sick, started getting sicker and sicker and sicker, and they didn't really help him. And the union, which was the cops' union, they had the black union, the black cops, and so on and so forth. He didn't get what he was supposed to get, in life. And so, and when I look at all those things, I begin to realize that, well, that's how it is. That's how it was. That's how it is. And kind of, I don't want to say it, but that's how it still is. Because when this guy, Richard Brody, wrote for the New Yorker magazine, he wrote a piece about Top of the Heap for New Yorker magazine, and his whole thing was that it was a discovery he made about this movie called Top of the Heap, and he wrote this incredible piece about it in Top of the Heap, New Yorker magazine, and so when he wrote that, and that was the point in which I said, oh, I guess this is some sort of a classic movie. That's what he said in the art. This is a classic movie. This has to be recognized, right, in the right way, right? And then I began to go in all this stuff that other writers had written about Top of the Heap through the years that I didn't really know about, right? Guys have been writing books about Top of the Heap. If people have been writing all kinds of stuff, magazine articles here and there about Top of the Heap, about what it really meant to Black people, what it really meant to people who young Black people who wanted to be artists, who saw what I did with Top of the Heap, and they were able to begin to live their dream because of that movie, right? And now it's reached a level that it has that kind of thing happening with it. It just propels people to realize that this is a classic movie, right? So then, when not too long ago, when after it played at the Brooklyn Academy of Music, right? It's that's a historic place in Brooklyn, right? And I found out they was going to play there, and I said, well, nobody told me about this, and then I realized that they thought I was dead, right? And this guy thought I was dead, and he had the print made from some company in England. He had a beautiful new print of Top of the Heap made, and he was going to show it at the Brooklyn Academy of Music, and which played it for 2 weeks. It did very, very well. And I'm going like, yeah. So I had to call him up and say, I had to tell him that, hey, I'm still alive. You have no right to do this unless I give you my permission. I'm still alive, right? And the guys wrote, the director of the school wrote, oh, I didn't know that. They didn't tell me. They didn't tell me that you were. I thought you were dead. I said, no, I'm still alive. You hear me? Right? It's just, so we started talking and everything like that. And they showed the movie, but I appreciate it because, again, it started a lot of chatter about it. And the most strangest thing, a guy at the New York Times was a critic for the New York Times. He pulled out the review from the guy who wrote the review 50 years ago. 50 years ago. He pulled out that review from the New York Times and just sort of wrote what the guy wrote 50 years ago, right? And it was a whole different time in history. It was a time when white people were putting down Black people wherever they could, right? And certain white people were doing that all the time, And I read with lots of white people who were like really good human beings, that they understood that that's all nonsense. You can't listen to people like that. How could they be a critic? How can they be a critic and talk like that? How could they be a critic and put down somebody's work when it has such depth of meaning and all that kind of stuff like that? So that happened recently. But about a year ago now, 2 years ago, or something like that, when that happened. About a year ago, when they played at the Academy of Music, and this guy rewrites the negative article critique that the guy wrote 50 years ago. And I'm thinking to myself, how in the world can anybody do that to themselves? To take something that's been written 50 years ago, it's a whole different time in life, a whole different time in the relationship of white people to Black people, and what black people were trying to do, and so on and so forth. They were still getting their butts kicked, and then he had to write that stuff all over again, right? So somebody, I think Richard Brody, at the time, I think he got in touch with him and said some things to him about it. That terrible, stupid things you said, right? But by then it gotten out in the New York Times, but again, the people at CBS in New York, Morning News, Gayle King, and her people, they heard about it, and they sent somebody to Brooklyn Academy of Music to see it, right? And then they wanted me to come on the show. So I'm going to go on the show, but I've been putting it off until I can coordinate everything with my new movie, Avatar Mania, which is going to open in New York. Through the holidays, I couldn't do anything for the past 4 months. I couldn't hardly do anything because it was a bowling season and Thanksgiving and Christmas and this one and that one, New Year's, everything. Now we're working on a whole different level to get that movie done. But at the same time, that I don't really want to talk about, except to say to you that I'm having a problem now with James Cameron. And this is just a strange thing that happened. Years ago, I hadn't even finished my movie, Avatar Mania. Hadn't even finished. I went to India and made a movie. I went to India and made this movie, right? And to me, it's 1,000 times better than Top of the Heap, right? And I went there, and I made this movie, and I was in the midst of a lot of bad things that had happened through the course of life, and I had put it on the shelf and not worked on it for years, just let it sit there, because I wasn't in emotional shape to want to work on it. My marriage broke up, all kind of stuff like that. So I remember putting an ad in the newspaper, the Daily Variety and Hollywood Reporter, right? An ad in the newspaper that I have the movie, it's called Avatar Mania, blah, 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 blah. And what happens to me? I get this threatening letter from James Cameron and 20th Century Fox. They threaten me every which way but left. They threaten me all kinds of different ways. Threaten to do this and do that to me. And I'm thinking to myself, what are they talking about? What are they talking about? There's two. James Cameron's a billionaire. 20th Century Fox is a multi-billionaire. They got all the money in the world, and they're going to beat up on me. I said, go fuck yourselves, right? But I had this material they sent me. I still have it. I still have this material that I saved, right? And I said, who do they think they are? That they can just jump on somebody and then claim to own everything. I said, you don't own me. You don't even own the word avatar. Avatar is a Sanskrit word. It has nothing to do with you. You use it as a title of a movie, right? And you can say that you own it, but I know you don't own it. I don't care if you own it anyway, because if you want to talk about anything, I used it first. I've been working on this movie since 1980. See, it was 1980. And so I think it was meant to be my pièce de résistance. I think that's what it was meant to be, right? Because the movie has all kinds of stuff in it that is happening now, right now in life. And I think to myself, I didn't know that back then. I didn't know it, but as the years passed, I began to realize that the spirit of who I am, the spirit that moves my life, is telling me what to do with this thing, how to handle it, and so on and so forth. And that's why that it's happening now. That's why it's happening now. And I realize everything comes to its time sooner or later. Everything comes to its time. It doesn't matter. I remember the guy who did the movie about Muhammad Ali. He did that guy did the movie about Muhammad Ali, and he couldn't sell it for nothing, right? And he tried to sell it for 20 years, 25 years, something like that. Couldn't sell it. And then one day, he just sold it, just like that. It happened, right? And I don't know why it took so long, but she said, I don't know. I just kept trying. And one day, somebody realized this is a valuable piece of work, right? And so that's what it is. You have to find the right people. Because a lot of people are stupid and don't know anything. They just don't know anything about about life, about what we're doing. You know, that's why I would never go back to Hollywood because I think a lot of the stuff they do is just kind of stupid. It's just stupid stuff. You know what I mean? A lot of it doesn't help anybody. But a lot of it creates a situation where they become more destructive than anything else. I can't believe that Hollywood does stuff that's so freaking destructive. Tearing the country apart, tearing the world apart, right? But they still do it every day and think that they're doing great stuff. I look at them and go, wow, man, I can't believe that you think that this is great stuff. It's crap, pure crap. And you got to know that, right? If you don't know that, what do you know? And they can put people like me down. They can say, well, yeah, films are me trying to get my movie in the Academy Awards. They won't even talk to me. I call them up, they won't even talk to me. And I just start thinking, I wonder if they're trying to protect James Cameron. I don't know. You know, he's a Academy Award winner for his movie Avatar. I wonder if they're trying to protect me. I mean, protect him, you know, and they won't even talk to me, you know, because I say to them things like, by the way, you kept Black people out of the Academy Awards for generations. And the way you did it was it cost so much money to get in there that they couldn't get in anyway. You know, because you get some brothers from the ghetto who somehow put together a movie and they have any money to get in the Academy Awards, right? So a lot of recently in life, they would go like, well, we gotta let some Black people in. We gotta let them in. But then if they let Black people in, and Will Smith goes up there, does his thing, which is crazy thing, and on the Academy Awards, you know, see, that's what happens, man. When you give an inch, you're going to take a mile. That's just all that happens. So anyway, man, so Top of the Heap is living its second life. It is. It's living its second life. We're going to show it again. I think we're going to show it again at the Brooklyn Academy of Music again, because we're going to show it because we never got a chance to have an open discussion about it with people. All they did was see the movie, right? And some review that somebody made. But I think that it's important. I always thought it's important to be able to have some kind of open discussion about it. Well, the reason this was done is because of this. The reason this happened is because of this happened, right? And the reason I said this is because it had to be said. And the reason that it didn't win everything in the world is because this white producer did this and this and this to the movie. He was trying to destroy it in some way, but he wasn't quite sure how to destroy it. In some ways, he actually helped me because you could see that he was doing he tried to destroy the movie. But, you know, and for instance, like I said, I had a little kid in the movie, and I wanted to use that to be able to say to my wife, I understand now. I have a daughter who got all messed up. I didn't know what I was doing. But my son, I know a little more about my life now, you know, and I want to help him become a good man, right? But I was not able to do that because Joe Solomon, he cut it out of the movie. He cut that part, my son, out of the movie. And he did it purposely to hurt me. You know, it was almost like he was a real son who got taken away from me, right? It really hurt, you know, but I always wanted to restore that, but I don't know if I can or not, because I don't know where the parts are and all that kind of jazz like that. So I have to accept what it is and be able to talk about it in some other way, you know. So anyway, I just want to tell you that a lot of it is about my family and everything. It is, because, like I said, it's really about my brother, what happened to him. It's about my other brothers, what happened to them. It's about my family, what happened to them. It's about me, how I got to where I got to, and about all the hurt and pain that we all went through, and the hurt and pain that I gone through, and how I was able to recover from that somehow, right? And I still go through it because a lot of that stuff is in your DNA. You know, it's just there. It's just there, and you. I wake up in the middle of the night thinking about all the terrible things that happen in the course of life, right? And I also think about how I was able to be strong enough and had enough good sense to work with people that that encouraged me in a good way. Like I said, from the time that I got into the acting studio and I met people like Al Pacino and people like that, and I can remember Bobby De Niro. He didn't talk to me, by the way, now for some reason. I guess he became too famous or something like that. But I remember him and I used to hang around in New York together, right? And one Thanksgiving, he had no place to go. I don't know what happened in his family. I don't know what was happening, but I remember that I was having come to my little apartment with my lady at the time, and we had Thanksgiving together, that kind of stuff like that. And then when he started working, and I had moved to California, and I had a house in, I think it was in Malibu, something like that, that he would come out and stay with me in my house when he came to California. He would stay with me, and then all of a sudden, he just blew up in terms of his career, right? After that, he wouldn't talk to me anymore. I think it was because they were during the drug era. Everybody was smoking marijuana and stuff like that, right? And he was too. But then when you start to work, you realize, oh, that's got to go. It's all got to go. You can't do that stuff anymore, right? Clear-minded, clear-headed, and like that. So I remember he came to California, and we were together because he had a black girlfriend and I had a white girlfriend, right? So that was the kind of connection we had there. And so he said, no, I don't touch that stuff anymore. I don't touch anything anymore, right? At all, right? And he was a big druggie way back, right? And he said, I don't touch that stuff anymore. And I said, okay, I understand. That's that, And so I then talked to him. I'd never talked to him long time, right? Long years. And funny part about it, he's where I am right now in Cincinnati. He's doing a movie. He's doing a movie, He's doing a little movie and not too far from where I am. I know where the location is and everything like that, but I can't go see him because I ain't not gonna go say, hey Bob, what's happening, man? And he'll sure it'll upset him in some way, right? Because of the fact that he kind of just threw me away completely in the course of life. So, but that's all right. I don't know. It's all for a purpose. It's all for a purpose because I guess I didn't want to lean on anyone else because it would change the nature of my work. It would change the nature of what I'm thinking about doing, right? If I wanted to lean on him, because he has all the money in the world and so on and so forth, it would change the nature of who I am, right? So I know that my point in life, what I have to do is to continue on my work and to do what I still have one more movie to do that haven't got ready to shoot it, and then the pandemic started, and I couldn't leave the house. See, so most of the time I stay at home all the time. I don't leave the house. I stay at home writing and stuff like that, and I'm happy to be at home because I'm preparing on my autobiography and stuff like that, which, like I said, I'm going to do that stage. But also there are two other things I'm doing that I said, okay, I can't do that, but I got to do my last movie because it involves me looking for the graves of my mother and father in Connecticut, because I don't know where their graves are. So it's the movie that's part fiction, but reality also, like look for their graves because I haven't been there for a long time, and I still have a lot of family members who live up in Connecticut, and because that's where everything started for me. It's like that. See, so I'm just doing whatever I can right now with my life and hoping that I live long enough to be able to finish everything I'm trying to finish. The library in my town in Bridgeport, Connecticut, has started a vision for myself, my son, Christoph, and I have a place in the library where they have everything about his career, everything about my career in the library. I didn't even know they were doing that until I found out about a year or two ago. So I said, oh, as I get all my material together, I'll make copies and give them to you so you can get them in the library so that people in Connecticut or whoever, they know they can always go to the central library and then find out whatever stuff I might have done, what my life is like. So I went from here to here, that kind of jazz like that. So I'm doing that. That's what they're going in with Top of the Heap. There's a lot more to it. There's a lot more to it in terms of my life story, et cetera, but it's way too much to do here. And I just want to give you kind of a capsule idea of what went on, how it was created, and it was created really by the little kid from Bridgeport, Connecticut, who was scared out of his mind about everything, but somehow was able to walk around in a kind of a mute kind of way and grow up. And little by little, I began to think, I'm going to save the world. And that's what the Top of the Heap was for.
Speak your mind and forever hold the peace. Take a stand for the things that you believe. Let the world hear exactly how you feel. Stand up and shout. Hey, look at me right now. I'm alive, and then speak out.
All right, we are back, and we were talking about Top of the Heap, and it is amazing the dearth of information about this film. I hope that interview shed a lot of light on what went on behind the scenes of this film, but really, this movie, I mean, it should have put him on the map, and it's such a shame that it didn't.
By all rights, by all good graces, this should have set him up.
Yeah, it's crazy. It definitely reminds me of when you hear Sam Greenlee talk about the spook who sat behind the door. And I know that's a different situation where the movie didn't succeed because the FBI are fucking terrible. But it's still like, to hear him talk about it in more recent years in interviews, it's clear that like none of those emotions have faded at all.
Well, last month when I spoke to Julian Compton, who was out making independent films, much like St. John, eventually goes to Hollywood. She's relegated to writing screenplays. They won't give her a shot to direct. When she finally does, they end up making her change the end of the script. And she's still bitter about it all these years later.
Sure.
To hear these stories of St. John as well, talking about how in the movie, he had a son, and they cut out the son completely. And the way that this movie is edited, you could have done anything with this. We go all over the place with these fantasies and everything. So it's like, what else could have been in this movie? That was one reason too why I was tracking down lobby cards, because there's a lot of times where it's like shots in the lobby cards aren't in the movie. And I was wondering if it was one of these, but everything's there, it looks like. But it sounds like this was not maybe radically different. I'm very curious what his original vision of this was, and what that son character would have been like. I mean, he's got enough trouble on his hands with the daughter, but then he also had the son, and now you've got this whole somebody who looks up to me, and I'm supposed to be a male role model for this character.
Isn't there at one point they mention, and it's almost even a side note, like they mentioned they have two kids. But you're right. You just only see the daughter. But I think at some point they mentioned they have the two children. But you're right. You never see the son.
Because of the way the movie focuses so much on traditional masculinity and how men are supposed to behave and what men are supposed to do, it seems like it would have been pretty important to see him interacting with his son.
There's that whole thing too in one of the dream sequences where he's in a hospital bed. And apparently he's had to eject out of his, maybe his plane. I mean, because we don't see any of it. We just see him in the bed. And that great moment of him and his sergeant, Walsh, I think it is, and how there's a light between them. And he's got the star filter going on the camera lens. So it's like a star between them. And then he talks to his sergeant. And he says that there was a voice telling him to get out of the machine, and it just kept saying, "Get out of the machine." And it's kind of reminiscent of when earlier on he receives a phone call in one of his dreams, and it's just this voice, kind of like a Dick Laurent is dead, going, "Your mother has died," and it's like, so it's like almost like supernatural forces out there controlling some of these things, like these mysterious voices that tell George what to do. And that great Swedish nurse that just is helpless at his command.
Yeah, I wonder if David Lynch saw this.
Yeah, that would be trippy though, huh? That'd be great. That would be great. Yes.
That would be. Yeah, I wonder how hard it would have been to see in the late 70s.
Oh, yeah.
I know.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder how this movie moved around. Like you were saying, Gary, I don't know who saw this, when they saw it, where it played. This was just one of those like footnotes that I saw a lot in different articles and stuff about blaxploitation movies. And again, you see the poster and you're just like, oh man, this looks like a kick-ass blaxploitation film. And you watch it and you're just like, what the hell am I watching? I don't know, but I love it. You know,
I love it, exactly.
I could see a lot of people coming out of this theater, probably not even making it past the half-hour mark, and being like, what the fuck was this?
If anybody who loved The Exorcist figured out that William Peter Blatty made this other movie called Ninth Configuration, and they were like, oh, this is totally going to be like The Exorcist. And then it's like, no, actually.
Again, very weird film, but I love it so much.
It's one of those movies that, as I was watching it the first time, I think because I expected it to be maybe a more conventional crime film, I was a little, I don't want to say a little disappointed, but a little bit like it just wasn't what I was expecting. But by the end, I just like, I think finally got with its vibe. And since I first watched it, it's one of those movies that will just like pop into my head at random times. And to me, that's sort of the true sign that I really like a movie is when I keep thinking about all the things it's trying to do.
It's very ambitious.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
That's right.
If I had to do a double feature, I would probably watch this with Head. Just the way that Head jumps around, and Head has its own internal logic. We kind of revisit things as we go through it. Just that style of montage, I think, reminds me of that. But it's definitely a different animal than Head, because it does tell it tells a narrative. You know, there's not necessarily a narrative to Head. It's more themes, skits, those kind of things. But this one, there's definitely a lot, and there's a lot of narrative that he's trying to give to us, and just in a very unusual way. And man, do I appreciate it.
Yes, so impressive. And I truly don't understand why this doesn't have some kind of restored fancy Blu-ray with loads of special features and a documentary, and it deserves it.
For the record, Top of the Heap was released on Blu-ray by Code Red in 2017 but is now out of print. The sole extra on the disc was the trailer, and the legality of the release is unsure.
Like I said, I don't know who owns the rights to this, and I don't know if he knows who owns the rights to it. It might be one of those that's just kind of fallen through the cracks, but yeah, somebody's got to rescue this. Somebody's got to bring this out, and yeah, get Mr. St. John. He's not getting any younger. You know, you got to get him recorded and talking about this and give us more information, because like we talked a lot about the movie, but we didn't go into all of the details of it. And there are so many things where it's like, well, what happens with this? What happened? You know, tell me more of the original vision of this, and how did this happen? How did this happen? And you know, like, did you shoot all the stuff with the fantasy sequences before, and then you shaved off the facial hair so you could be George Lattimer, the straight edge cop kind of thing, or you know, did you shoot that later? Yeah, because I that was the first thing that I picked up on, was just like, oh, he's always got like that cool mustache beard type combo here, but then when he's George the cop, he doesn't have that. He's just so like plain, you know, milquetoast type of guy, but just with that seething anger underneath.
Those kinds of decisions are so incredible, because like you could go more over the top and have more obvious like costume changes, but that subtle facial hair change, it's he just like he packed the movie with little decisions like that, and I feel like you need to watch it multiple times to catch even half of them.
I totally agree. The more times, because I've watched this probably about 4 times now, and each time you pick up more and you see those connections more, and you can see that there is a real logic to this film. And I have yet to really, zero in 100% on it, but there's definitely a lot of stuff going on here. Like the one thing I was talking about with his mother earlier on, where he is dancing with his mother and they eventually kind of drift apart, and he looks back and it's this like beautiful Nubian princess, and this tribal music comes up on the soundtrack. She just kind of like dances off the screen. I'm just like, okay, that was a choice. So I'm not sure what he's doing, but it's doing something.
We could have had a whole long episode just dissecting the use of flags and uniforms and how they change, especially towards the end. Like, doesn't he have a pirate flag?
Yeah, there's the pirate flag on the U.S. flag. Yeah, and then also you're talking about uniforms. So not only does he have, the astronaut uniform, in the astronaut uniform, there's the orange jumpsuit, and this is before, prisons took that on, so I don't think that we're supposed to think about that. He's got the orange jumpsuit. He's got his cop uniform. He talks specifically like, I never want to put on that uniform again. He's got a trench coat I was talking about. And then he's got the white astronaut uniform. And it's very pointed when he takes off the American flag and takes off the NASA patch. And then he takes off his own life support system. So what you're talking about before, Gary, with like, maybe he does have this death wish. I mean, he literally is killing himself in space. He's ripping all that stuff off and throwing it off into the void of space.
But then, of course, it turns out to be a cheat and a lie. Yeah.
Yeah, don't throw that hot dog up here. Put that hot dog.
Yeah, what a brutal film. It's like in every scene, a different person in his life tells him in a different way that he's a failure. No wonder he has a death wish.
Yeah, like I said, by the end, that litany of, people being like N-word cop and this and that, and all, just like, bullshit and all, just all these words and phrases just going through his head. But so that by the end, that thing lasts for like, 30 seconds every time they show like all of the people that have piled on over this film. So let's go ahead and take another break and play a preview for next week's show.
Brother Charles is home. His mood's as black as his skin. He done the man's time, paid the man's price. Now he's back on the street, looking to even some scores. Welcome home, Brother Charles. The most outrageous, terrifying movie about the black experience you'll ever see. It tells it like it is, and the way some people think it should be. Welcome home, Brother Charles. When they're nailing the lid down on you, not much to lose by fighting back. Brother Charles has a secret weapon. His victims couldn't talk about it, their wives wouldn't. After you've seen it, you will. Welcome home, Brother Charles. They tried to take everything he had, including his manhood. A Crown International picture, rated R.
That's right. Black History Month concludes next week with a look at Welcome Home, Brother Charles. Until then, I want to thank my co-hosts, Sam and Gary. So, Gary, what's been keeping you busy, sir?
Like Jerry Jones, man, I'm just trying to keep at it. And I've been working on in particular, real quick, but it's apropos to Black History Month of all things. I'm reviving a kind of obscure, I'm reviving him in a short story, and I'm probably going to extend it at some point. There was a black guy named E.C. Stoner. He's one of the sort of black pioneers in the early days of the comic book business. I'm talking about the golden age in the 30s and the 40s. And he created this character, and I'm not going to tell the name of the character because I don't want somebody to beat me to the punch. But I'm taking the character and kind of reviving him. And of course, I'm giving E.C. Stoner, Emil Cecil Stoner, credit because he eventually became a fine artist. But he drew and wrote comics back in the day. And I'm taking that character of his and kind of setting him in the 70s, now that I think about it, and having some fun with that. And I'm going to tie it into some other kind of I don't quite have the extensive Marvel universe. I mean, I've written some comics and stuff, but I have my own little universe, and so I'm kind of tying him into that universe.
Oh, that's fantastic. Because according to your website, you've written, 9 comics, 18 novels, 50 short stories, and you've had 4,000 donuts?
Hopefully I have had 4,000 donuts. Lord have mercy, that'd be much bigger than I am now. But all of that's a little behind me. I've actually now up to about 22 novels. And recently I've done a little work in TV. I was on Snowfall, which is about crack and the CIA in 1980s South Central, where I grew up. It's a show on FX that streams on Hulu. So I've been on that show. This now is going to be our last season that's coming up, but I've had the good fortune to be on it for the last 4 years, so it's been a blast.
And Sam, what's keeping you busy?
This won't be announced for a while, so I probably shouldn't even bring it up. But at the beginning of the episode, you mentioned Michael Gonzalez. So I'm working on editing a book that Mike will be involved in, and Michael Gonzalez will as well. And so, yeah, so it's a small world, this film community of ours. Well, and hopefully I will be able to actually announce it soon. But it has to do with political violence in cinema. The other thing is check out my podcast, Twitch of the Death Nerve, and I have a Patreon, and what I'm going to be focusing on the next couple months is doing a series of in-depth episodes on Jean-Luc Godard's films. So lots of politics and cinema.
Well, thank you so much, folks, for being on the show. Thanks, everybody, for listening. If you want to hear more of me shooting off my mouth, check out some of the other shows that I work on. They are all available at weirdingwaymedia.com. Thanks especially to our Patreon community. If you want to join the community, visit patreon.com/projection booth. Every donation we get helps the projection booth and George take over the world.
Why do we try to make it better? Tell me, what does it get you? Why sweat it? It's only life, and no one gets out alive. Who really gives a damn if you make it, even if they let you? Even if they let you. Where would you go anyway when you finally arrive? Pacify the hate we take out on our brothers. Oh yeah. Truth is to make up a rule, then follow along. Top of the heap. One more hallelujah. For the top of the heap. Where a man can have the glory and the chance, no chance, no chance. There's just no chance for living.